Hello everyone, here are the solutions to GIF 6.5, problems 20 to 22. As you recall, you were required to write these in vertex form by completing the square and using the HK method. So watch the video just to get more practice or just to check your answers as well. So when we use completing the square to write in vertex form, we want to leave everything on one side. And I want to start by grouping the first two terms together. And I still want to leave the minus 129 here. So in order to complete the square, I need my leading coefficient to be 1, so I need to factor out that -2, just from the first two terms. So as I do that, whatever we factor out should always leave us with an x squared first. That's what we want. And then be careful here. A negative times a negative will give us a positive, because we're factoring out a -2. And then 2 times 16x will give us that 32x. But I'm going to leave some space here because I want to complete the square. Still leave the minus 129. And now this is where we're going to take half of 16. Ignore the sign because we're always going to add. Half of 16 is 8, and 8 squared is 64. But what did I really add there? We have to multiply 64 times -2. So that's a -128. So I need to do the opposite. As I'm keeping it on the same side, I want to add 128. So I still bring down that -2. That's our a value. This trinomial is a perfect square trinomial. It will factor into a quantity squared. And then that would give us an x. And again, we just take half of this number or the square root of this number to give us 8. And then at the end, those two numbers, -129 plus 128 is a -1. So what's nice about completing the square is when we're done, that equation is already in vertex form. Now if we go through and use the HK method, remember, show your work, always label. This is us finding h, so it's the opposite of b over 2a. What's b? 32. What's a? -2. So the opposite of b becomes a -32. 2 times a is 2 times -2. So this gives us -32 over -4, which is a +8. Then we want to find k, so make sure we label k is equal to. All we have to do is substitute 8 back into the function. So we're going to have -2 times 8 squared plus 32 times 8 minus 129. 8 squared is 64. 64 times -2 is -128. 32 times 8. 8 times 2 is 16. Carry the 1. 8 times 3 is 24 plus that 1 is 25. So 256 minus 129. Now we can combine the two negative numbers together, but one thing I will point out, if you double 128, you get 256. So 256 minus 128 is 128. And then 128 minus the 129, there is our -1. So these are in pieces. We need to put them back together to write vertex form. So if for the HK method, I now want to label that this is vertex form. So again, you need a y equals or f of x equals. Our a, again, was -2 times the quantity of x minus h squared. So that's x minus 8, that quantity squared, plus our k, which in this case will just be plus a -1 or -1. So if you take a look, this vertex form and this vertex form are the same, as they should be. That tells us we did this correct. All right, now when you guys take or go through the graded assignment, I'll have everything listed. So underneath each one, you're going to identify the vertex form, the vertex, and the axis of symmetry. Here, I'm just going to write them from both once. So our vertex, looking at the vertex form, would be 8, -1, or looking at h and k individually is 8, -1. Axis of symmetry, remember, is always a vertical line, so it's x equals 8. So now we're going to graph this. Plot the vertex first. So we have 8, -1. Again, a is -2, so as we count over, we're going to square that number, but we're going to count down, and we have to double that number that we get when we square. So if I move over 1, 1 squared is 1, and I have to double that now, so I'm going to move down 2. So over 1, down 2. So I double the square of 1. If we move over 2, 2 squared is 4, double that, that's 8, so we need to move down 8. So go back to the vertex, count over 2 on either side, and we're going to count down 8. And then as best you can, make this look like a parabola. And also, it's a good idea, draw on that axis of symmetry. It reminds you that it's a vertical line, so we need x equals the h value. So there's number 20. All right, let's take a look, completing the square for number 21. Again, we're going to start by grouping the first two terms together, and then leave that minus 95 halves at the end. Factor out a negative 1/2. That will always leave us now with the x squared. A negative times a positive is a negative. Now, because this is a half, I need to take half of the number that's right here to get a 9. So half of 18x is 9x. Leave some space to complete the square. Still keep the minus 95 halves. So what are we going to add? Half of 9, or half of 18 is 9. 9 squared is 81. What did we really write over here? 81 times a negative 1/2 is a negative 81 over 2. We need to do the opposite, so we need to add 81 over 2. So we're going to factor this perfect square trinomial now. Still leave the negative 1/2. This will become the quantity x plus 9 squared. Again, we're just factoring this. And then over here, negative 95, these have common denominators. Negative 95 plus 81 is negative 14 over 2 will turn into a negative 7. So the vertex form here, negative 1/2 times the quantity x plus 9 squared minus 7. Going through hk, h is going to equal the opposite of b over 2a. What is b? Negative 9. What is a? Negative 1/2. So this becomes the opposite of b is now a positive 9 over 2 times negative 1/2. So this is 9 over negative 1, so that's negative 9. Again, label k is equal to, we're just going to substitute the negative 9 in here carefully. So we get negative 1/2 times negative 9 squared minus 9 times negative 9 minus 95 halves. Negative 9 squared gives us an 81 times a negative 1/2, negative 81 over 2 plus 81 minus 95 halves. And again, I'm going to start by adding the two fractions together. They're both negative, so I just add them together and keep it negative. So 1 and 5 is 6, 8 and 9 is 17, so we get a negative 176 over 2 plus 81. Now to divide 176 by 2, yes, it'll be negative, but if you need to, do some long division. Try not to rely on a calculator. We take 2 into 17, because 2 can't go into 1. 2 into 17 goes 8 times. 8 times 2 is 16. We subtract. That gives us a 1. We bring down this 6. 2 into 16 again is 8. So we get a negative 88 plus 81 is negative 7. So what's the vertex form here? Again, we're writing it like we're not even looking at the completing the square one. We're going to label this vertex form. Becomes y equals a, again, was negative 1/2 times the quantity of x minus h. H was a negative 9, so x minus a negative 9 becomes x plus 9, that quantity squared. And then our k is negative 7. So this vertex form matches this vertex form. What's the vertex? Negative 9, negative 7. Axis of symmetry, the equation is x equals negative 9. Now we're going to graph it. All right, so we go to negative 9, negative 7. Our parabola is going to open down. Now I'm not going to change my coordinate plane here. We'll get the idea, but this is why I had you guys do this on larger graph paper. So if we count when a is a 1/2, or in this case a negative 1/2, if we count over 1, we're going to count down because it's negative, down 1/2. So we still square 1, but then we take half of that number. So over 1, down 1/2. Over 2, 2 squared is 4, half of that, we're back to 2. So over 2, down 2. I'm just going to eyeball this here. And I'm going to run out of room though, but if we were to count, we can skip 3, but if we counted over 4, 4 squared is 16, half of that is 8. So over 4, it would be down 8. But when our a is a fraction, that's less than 1, we have a wider parabola. So that's what our parabola is going to look like. right, and let's take a look at 22. Again, to start with completing the square, group the first two terms together. Still keep the minus 73 here. Now I have to factor out a negative because I want a positive 1 in front of that x squared. So we're going to factor out a negative. That's going to have an x squared. Then a negative times a positive will give us that negative here. This doesn't change. It's just 16x. Leave some space. What are we going to add to both sides, or within the parentheses rather? Half of 16 is 8. 8 squared is 64. But we really added a negative 64. So that means I need to just add a 64 here. So now this becomes y is equal to really a negative 1 times the quantity of x plus 8 squared. And negative 73 plus 64 is a negative 9. So there's the vertex form by completing the square. HK method. H is equal to the opposite of B over 2A. B is a negative 16. A is a negative 1. So we're going to get the opposite of negative 16 is 16. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. So we get a negative 8. K is going to equal, now this first term starts off as the opposite of negative 8 squared minus 16 times negative 8 minus 73. So negative 8 squared is 64, but we also have this negative out in front, so this becomes a negative 64. 16 times, or negative 16 times negative 8 will be positive. 8 times 6 is 48. We carry the 4, so 8 times 1 is 8 plus 4. We get a 128 minus 73. Now in this case, if it helps, we can add the two negative numbers together. So as we do that, we're going to get a negative 137 plus 128. And you could think of this as you owe $137, but you have 128, so you'd still owe 9. And then our vertex form is y equals, A was a negative 1. We don't have to use the 1, but the negative sign has to be there, times the quantity x minus h. So x minus negative 8 is x plus 8, that quantity squared, and then our k minus 9. So this vertex form matches this one. Our vertex is negative 8, negative 9. The equation for the axis of symmetry is x equals negative 8. This one will also open down. So all three of these did. So for this one, I did adjust my coordinate plane to fit this. So we have to go to negative 8, negative 9 for our vertex. And we're going to count down normal. So whatever we move over, we square, but we count down. So if we move over 1, down 1, because 1 squared is 1. Count over 2, down 4, because 2 squared is 4. And if you had enough room, you can count over 3 and down 9, but this will be enough. And again, we could draw in the axis of symmetry. So make sure you practice these problems some more. Go back, watch the video, and correct them as you see fit.